Hello, everybody, and welcome to Greet the Week. This is Jan Moray, and I have our co-host, Mona Duncan, and we
Hello.
have several guests joining us today. So welcome to everybody. And today we're talking about perception busting. So Mona, help us get started on this.
Okay, will do. What is perception? It is the way we see something. And the way we see it, I can see maybe diminished a little bit. I can hear, I can touch, I can feel. And so we have a tendency to think what we see is really what it is. But often, and then what we see, to us, it becomes our reality. But it may not be real because we may not be seeing all of the aspects to it.
Right.
And so I thought today that we would be looking at how all of this affects everything we do. And as we can begin to deliberately, see things in new perspective, see it a little bit differently, whether it is, getting a little closer to or putting a little distance with so that we can see the big picture instead of, sometimes you can't see the forest because you can't see the, what is it? You can't see the forest trees. As we can get away from it and see that, there's a whole bunch of trees and they're all different trees, but they are working together in the same environment and it's beautiful. Yeah. And so I thought we would look a little bit about that. One of the things, surely the majority of people are familiar with the Covey's old woman, young woman picture. Mm-hmm. And how that it's that same picture, but it depends on how you look at it, as focusing your eyes and putting it up and so forth, as to whether or not we see an old woman in it, and then can we also see a young woman in the picture, and then can we flip back and forth to see that it's a picture, but it contains both, and to see that within ourselves. I have a couple of pictures like that I want to kind of show us, but do you have anything to comment on that, Jan, before we look at the picture?
Yeah. Thinking of perception, one of the things that I found that I thought was kind of interesting is that you get your mindset that something is a certain way, that you read an article or you read a book or and this is what it said, or even an email. You read an email and think, well, this is what was said in the email. And then you go back to the email several days later and you go, it doesn't say that at all.
Exactly.
and that's where you really get really understand what this thing about perception is, because when I read it, I was in a certain frame of mind that I read this message into it. But letting it sit for a few days, I go back and the message is totally different. I missed it the first time, or I was in the wrong frame of mind to get it the first time.
Right. There was a thing in the paper this morning that was a cartoon. I don't remember which one it was, but anyway, two guys were talking. They were, in a bar over beer, and the guy said, "Well, now that I tell you about what happened on that big blow up that we had, I'm beginning to think maybe I was the problem." He was telling his friend all about, she did this or he did this and all this. Yeah. But now I'm beginning to realize, maybe I was part of that problem. Yeah.
Well, that is so as we can with putting your thoughts into words, because that happens a fair amount. Once you start telling somebody about it, you're like, well, it's really not as bad as I had made it out to be.
Right. And sometimes whether we're talking to a friend or to a counselor, we're speaking it out and it's hitting that wall and it's coming back to us, and I'm really hearing what I'm saying. Yeah. Maybe I'm even, hearing my own tone of voice and so forth. So did my picture just get real dark? I think the sun went down is what it was.
Okay.
But anyway, if you would allow me to, and give everyone the notice that I'm going to share the screen. Okay. And I have right here for us to share this.
All right.
And put it on the big mode. Is it going? Yeah, there it goes. Yeah. Okay, first of all, look right here at this little, wait. Let me flip that up. Can you see this one on the right?
On the right, with the little puppet or
our pictures
shadow. Yeah.
Okay. Well, forget that one on the right. Let's just look at this one. So, what do you see right here in this picture?
Well, it depends upon the way you look at that cylinder. as to whether it looks like a square or a circle.
Mm-hmm.
From one view, it's a square, and the other view, it's a circle.
And yet, and then also, you know, other things that we could really read into that or think about that is, well, how's that circle? I mean, how does that cube or that cork or whatever, how's it just hanging in space? And the yellow depends on light reflecting from one direction, and the blue depends on the light reflecting from another direction. Well, here, this one, okay, can you see that? Can you see two things there?
Yes, but I've seen this before, so I see the two.
So do you see the liar written out? And do you see the person in this particular picture that is a liar? Sometimes we have to turn our faces sideways and that kind of stuff in order to be able to see them. And then this one, I love this. Can you see both good and evil? Because sometimes, you know, they're just kind of, things are kind of mixed together. And then one more, and can you see the clown? And can you also see the circus? Just in case.
To turn it to see the
You have to turn it. Yeah, here's horses that's running around and jumping over the hurdles, and here's a person with a balloon that's their hand in the air, and here's a guy riding a unicycle, and anyway, here's all the circus itself. There's the elephants, and here's the big top. But if you turn it sideways, turn it up the other way, it's a picture of the clown. Here's his hat, here's his eyes, here's his mouth, and here's his collar. So how that we can see things so differently until we get another perception of it, or maybe we look at it differently, or maybe someone explains it to us differently,
right,
or explains it to us from where they were coming from and saying it. Well, this past weekend, I did a basic intensive training, and one of the things that I do in that is I have some of the reality therapy, choice theory journals, and I asked them to thumb through it and do some homework to pick out an article that's in keeping with their interest and read it, and to come back and teach us what they learned in the article and how they will apply it to their particular point of view, or to their, you know, whatever their field of interest is. And I'm always impressed with it. They're always so great. But two of them just goes hand in hand with what we're talking about today. And Linda Chawala looked at the continuing of healthy communications, and how many of us don't want good, healthy communications. Mm-hmm. And she drew, on the board, she drew this spectrum. And on one spectrum, it was the satisfying relationships and communication. And on the other spectrum, it was unsatisfying communication and relationships. And then she began to look at what was contributing to each of those. And so under the unsatisfying relationships, she listed the 7 deadly habits that breaks communication. And under the satisfying ones, it was the 7 caring that contributes to healthy communication. But in looking at those, and then as the observer, and, you know, as watching what she did, I got a new insight. I saw a new perspective. My knowledge of all of that began to deepen even more as I began to see that those negatives are ones that we really want to keep hidden, but in that time of pressure may come out.
Yeah.
And the positive ones are the ones that we're so glad for the world to see and know. And as we begin to realize, you know what, I want that to be my all the time go-to.
Mm-hmm. But that takes a lot of work to do that, because we keep wanting to go to the negative side.
Excuse me for interrupting. Mona, is there a chance that you could email the 7 deadly habits that interfere with communication? I don't know what they are. I'd like to know what they are.
Well, I was just thinking about that in months to come, weeks to come, each one is an individual Greek week. It's a topic for
one of the
Greek.
Yeah.
We
have to wait
you have Glasser's books, don't you, Jerry? Jerry, you have
Well, yeah, but I don't know where to look for this. I don't know.
Okay.
Could you possibly just
I will send it to you.
Yeah.
And it's Mona Duncan at gmail.com. If anyone else wants it, email me and I will send it to you also. And plus those, if you'd like.
That'd be great. Thank you very much.
Okay. And one other one, it was Mackenzie Bleeker was talking that she works with autistic children. And she likened the fact to that all too often, we have this box and we put all of our information in the box because that's maybe a good way to handle it or keep up with it. But then we put the lid on it, and what is in that box has become our stereotyping. It's become that stereotyping, and then we stick that box on top of the person that we are working with, or on top of the person that we are, and that they become everything negative that's in that box. And sometimes we do that with stereotyping. Another person, another age group, someone that has different color skin, someone that has different, whatever. There's so many ways for us to be different. And sometimes we put all of what we think or what we've even heard from other people as to what that person is, and we put that box on there. And so when we see that person, we begin to see them as the box that they're containing it, because we have the lid on it and new information, just can't get out. And so to change our perspective, that stereotyping or putting things in a box is seeing things the way we want to see it. When we begin,
I don't want to disrupt your train of thought and your agenda here, but that made me think of, we hear so much in psychology, including I think William Glasser stuff, about how the importance of self-perception, self-awareness, self-esteem. Who am I?
Exactly.
And something that I have seen a lot is what our definition of ourself is one of our most limiting perceptions.
Exactly.
Whatever I think I am, could be quite a problem in the relationship, because I'm probably wrong.
Yeah.
Exactly, Rick. Exactly.
Building my self-esteem and my self-awareness, my self-esteem is actually dysfunctional, and that is counterproductive in most psychologists.
Right.
They build my self-awareness.
And so back to Mackenzie, you know what? She had in this box, she had put our behavior car.
Oh.
Behavior car.
The car.
Behavior car was in there, but it was stuck. It couldn't get out of the box because, as I've said before, we know ourselves only by hearsay. And if someone has said, you're this, you're that, you're something else, and if we don't believe it, we kind of stick that label on us and think, well, maybe I am that way because that's my mom, it's my dad, it's my brother. Oh, whoa, I admire my brother, and he says I'm a squid.
I would disagree with that. We don't only build ourselves by perceptions of others.
Yeah.
We build ourselves by what we think we want to be, what we think we want to say about ourselves.
And so she began to look at, how do we fix this? Well, first of all, we just take the lid off the box. Now, the box is still there, but there's a freedom to come out. Well, she drew another box because in her working with the children, she wants them to see things in a different perspective. And so they can keep, we're at least going to take the lid off of this box that others have put you in. But here's another box beside it, and you can put in whatever you choose. And she has a car in that box too. She's already put it in there.
Yeah.
And it's what I think of you and what I see about you. And beginning to help that person begin to make some decisions. For example, they were going to a social event. And what is one of the boxes that autistic people, you know, that they're not social.
Mm-hmm.
They were going to a social event, and for something about in the process of going to that, this kid ripped his shirt. You know, I mean, he just ripped it. And when they got ready to go, she gave him this jacket to put on, and he said, "You're not going to make me change my shirt?"
Oh.
And her response was, "No, I'm not. You know, if you choose to, if you'd be more, we're going to be seeing people. If you'd be more comfortable, you could change it if you want one that's not ripped. See, here's a new box. You can put a new behavior in there.
Yeah.
You can put a new perception." But I'm not talking just about. Yeah, I'm talking about the person the people we live with. I'm talking about our families. I'm talking about the people we work with. I'm talking about anything that we have stuck a box on. How can we begin to look at it differently and get a different perspective, and therefore a different connection and a different feeling with these people or individuals or groups of, see them differently.
Yeah. You know, something that comes to mind with me that I've been discussing with various people lately is a lot of these tests, kind of like Myers-Briggs, you know, where it gives you a personality type. And then there's so many of them, and there's so many things. And to me, that puts somebody in a box that, you know, you're supposed to be this kind of person, or only this type of person becomes a leader or becomes a caregiver, or, and it's just always bothered me to label people that way. And I mean, the Myers-Briggs especially is so big in business about, you know, learning how to deal with other employees. But I'm going, who remembers what all the types are and how you have to interact with those people? You just try to understand the person and what motivates the person, instead of saying, well, you know, he's a whatever, and I have to treat that person that way. And just curious as to what your thoughts, Mona, or anybody else. I think Charlotte.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Put a comment in the chat. Yeah, Charlotte's saying that they do label people and only a snapshot in time. Well, some of them are supposed to be actual personality traits, but so what? And I just don't like labeling a person and saying, well, you're not supposed to be that way. You know, you're not supposed to say those kinds of things. Your type is this. And I'm like, well, who are you to tell me what I'm supposed to do and who I'm supposed to be?
And we got to get to know ourselves, to know who we truly are.
Yeah.
Who we truly are. As a matter of fact, even on those Myers-Briggs, you know, but this person is emotional. And, well, so what?
Right.
So what? You know what? It is that emotion that drives the passion. Of course, it needs to be looked at. That is, you know, back to the kid that tore his shirt. He tore his shirt because he was emotional, okay?
Right.
But also the fact that he began to want to be around people in a more presentable way, that also is emotional.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
it's those emotions that are healthy and healing, the love and the belonging, you know what? We need to nurture them and give room for them to grow. But we need to do that within ourselves also. That whenever we are emotional toward that person, that, boy, we have given them all kinds of labels, maybe we need to begin to look at them and say, you know what? I'm thinking maybe that's probably, those lovable qualities is probably in them too. And maybe if I knew them, met them, worked with them under a different circumstance, or maybe if I just gave a little bit of leeway there to begin to look at and to try to see that I don't like, you know, I don't like to kind of back off from the way we're seeing it, and to give a little light there, a little color, a little leeway, a little wiggle room.
Or just really try to understand who they are instead of trying to fit them in some category, or put them someplace to help you understand them. Try, you know, face to face with them, to ask them what's going on in their life, what's happening, and just to gain a better understanding that way.
This is related to my question, wondering who they are. If you ask that question, you're usually asking for an answer which will be a label, however new or different it was from what you originally thought. My new perception of you is that you are a smiley person. Oh, you're already labeled. And that's I'm back to my question about, we still keep talking about, we really want to know how other people really are. How do we actually answer that question? If that's our core question, aren't we leading ourselves down the same wrong path?
I think we need to decide when labels are helpful and when they're not helpful.
Give me an example of helpful.
A smiling person. That's a new label.
Human being.
The thing of it is no matter what it is, we can never dictate to someone else. We change. Our motivations are internal. Our changes are internal. Change is an inside job. And we can set the environment where it is easy to change, or we can set the environment where it is extremely difficult to change. And it's setting an environment where, well, it really is your choice. You know, you can, we just put your jacket on, if you can wear that shirt that you, in your frustration, you rip, and I'm going to love you anyway. I'm not going to condemn you. And but would you feel more comfortable? Would you be able to? We're going over to our family. We're going to be together with some of your cousins. Would you be more comfortable if you didn't have a shirt that was ripped, and not blaming the child for ripping it, even though in his lack of control he did rip the shirt? And helping that person to evaluate himself, herself.
Well, that evaluation of yourself, that's what would then lead to a label.
What you're talking about. And so, even though, the shirt on and went to but you know what? Take an extra shirt with you. That whenever he gets there and he's around his folks, and maybe that sweatshirt is even hot, and he's wanting to take it off, but he's ashamed to take it off, you can say, hey, you know what? I brought an extra one. You want to help the person to save face. If they begin to realize, boy, I've been really acting like a label that's been put on me, or one that I've put on myself, maybe we can help them save face. Is that really who you are? No, I really would like to be in a nice shirt. Well, okay, let's go see if we can put it on. Now, is that going to help that person begin to realize, hey, what's that going to do to the relationship that you have with the person? It's going to deepen it. It's going to expand it. So we need to take our labels off, our tops off, so we won't blow our top. And we can begin to help the person have choices. Because all too often when we put ourselves in a box, I have people ask me all the time, well, whenever working with clients, how do you help them to make a choice? They don't know what they want. I said, well, then you ask them what you don't want. Because what I don't want, maybe what I'm doing, but that's not what I want to do. This is what I don't want. Can you give me any helps into how to not go that way again? Well, you can begin to see yourself differently as not being that one that rips the shirt, since we're already there on that example. That in your frustration that you throw things, tear things up. If you realize that has been your knee-jerk reaction, that's what you've been going to, but now you realize, you know what, I don't want to present myself that way. Well, the change is within you, and you can do that. I believe in you. And begin to give them a new perspective all the way around it. Not only do they have the energy to do that and the ability to do that, but they have it's in cooperation. And that goes back to the fact that everything we do, it has to be done alone. But you know what? We're not made to be alone. It needs to be alone, but in cooperation, in alliance with others.
To introduce a new subject, a little bit maybe, on considering labels. Is there a difference between labels that define and labels that describe? In other words, the difference between defining and describing of any word at all. I don't care what the word is. When we talk about other human beings, is there a level of difference between defining something, a person, and describing a person?
Well,
you might want to do a show about that someday. After a lot of thought, maybe, I don't know. I'm really curious about if there's a difference or not. Defining and describing.
I don't know. Okay. I don't know if there's a difference or not. A label or an instruction that gives instructions. You know, sometimes I need a label on the box that says, this is the top. Because sometimes you may be turning it upside down and it's hurting the contents. So sometimes, you know, we look at things. I've been thinking about this more and more and more. Someone will tell me something that, oh, it sounds so pleasant from my point of view. And I will say, oh, that's good. And then I realize maybe it's not good. You know, maybe it's not good. Who am I to judge that that's a good thing that you did?
Well,
I don't know where it's leading to.
I think that goes with describing the label too, because who's doing the describing? Whose perception is it coming from?
Right. Right. Would be shared something else, or we see someone, you know, ripping a shirt or whatever, and we're saying, oh, that's bad. Who am I to describe the fact that that's bad? Who am I to judge that?
I think there's an important distinction between defining and describing. They are probably the same thing most of the time. However, if what you're doing when you're describing is simply describing as best you can what you see in that moment, in the moment, and it doesn't go any farther than that the next moment you might describe something new and different, that would make describing different from defining. Defining is where you immediately go to generalization. But the reason we're having trouble with the distinction is because often defining is defining permanently, is defining and making a generalization based on that definition. What we're really talking about is I'm not smiling now, and you could describe the way I'm talking, but if you say, well, I know who he is so-and-so, and that's what he is, that's where you're making a mistake. Or if you predict that next time I talk, I'm going to talk in exactly the same way. So describing is what you could do about what I'm saying right now. And you have to be completely open-minded about what I might do or say next.
So describing is temporary, defining is permanent.
There you go. Could be, but describing can't be temporary. We want it to be liberating to other people. We want it to be temporary. But
so, I mean, it's a round robin. It's a round robin.
Very often it is a round robin, and we don't want it to be a round robin if we want to be.
And it takes us into a circle, just like with people, you know, it's going over and over and over in my mind, and it's driving me crazy. And it can drive us, you know, into those emotional things. It can drive us into the disconnecting habits. But that going around and around and around, it drives us crazy because we don't come to a decision. And once we can begin to come to a decision and act on it kindly, act on it gently, not pick up a stick to, you know, we want to act on it kindly. That whether something is said to us or whether we are speaking it to them, we want to speak it in love. We want to speak it in kindness so that it could be more readily received rather than another label that one's being ripped off and one's being stuck on. And whether it's done to us, we want to take, well, personally, okay? I have no right to talk for any we's. Mona, Williams, Duncan, things that are said to me, I want to look at it, that's that person's point of view, and I will take what they say seriously, but I'm not going to take it personally. Because the way they see where I'm coming from and what is me inside may be totally different from what they're seeing and saying. They may see me much more loving and kind than I have the generosity to be at that point in time. They may see me as much more critical or condemning than what is within. within myself. It's the fact that maybe in in our interaction, there was something that was maybe a little softening, or there was something that was but the only person I can have any authority over is me. But I have a vast influence on working with and living with others. And so it always goes back to inside. Internally motivated, we're internally healed, and we have those, we're equipped with that. We came born with all that equipment inside to heal ourselves mentally, emotionally, physically, and to maintain that health as long as we can.
Then that self-examination part, is this really the way I want to be? I notice how somebody's responding to what I do and say, and is that the kind of person that I want to be?
Yeah.
So then, but you make that decision yourself. I mean, somebody can tell you that, you're too harsh or you're coming on too strongly or whatever it is, but it's up to you to decide that you're going to make that change.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be.
And then, sometimes back to that stereotyping, and we think, well, so there's someone that's tall, girl or boy, either one, tall, they're still in junior high, but they're tall. And we say, oh, you're going to be a basketball player.
Yeah.
and that's part of the stereotyping. I'm seeing them, I'm labeling who I'm seeing them as something that I think they might be able to become, but they should want to become, because it's just part of that. And yet that can be to the person that would want to be a basketball player and already had that internal motive, or began to see that, I might like that. That may be encouragement. But to someone else, it may be completely discouragement, and it may even be seen as being condemning. And it goes back to the individual. Well, our time is over.
Yeah, our time is. I just want to say one more thing. Charlotte wrote in the notes about the author Rachel Hollis, who says that perception means that we don't see things as they are. We see things as we are.
As we are, exactly. It all comes from that internal thing, from what's behind our eyeballs, based on everything we've experienced from conception on, because our body stores those memories. And we often project them on others and on the things.
So our time is up for today. Thanks, Mona, for leading us in a thoughtful discussion here, and we'll see everybody next week on Grief the Week.